Hey everyone, Road to Gasparilla Day 14 is here. I'm Coach Kyle of Freedom Running Club, and today we're going to be talking about pacing for the half marathon, which is kind of the crown jewel of the event. It's the one that probably has the most spectators out there. It's the second event, it's the first event on day 2 of Gasparilla, and it's the one that, has a bit of a different course. So if you haven't done this before, definitely we have a video on the course preview. This is the one race where you're going to go on to Davis Island and then back onto Bayshore, and then the way you're going out and back is going to be reversed from the other races. So if you've never done this one before, definitely check out that video just to see about what it is to kind of expect in terms of the course itself, and also in terms of things like wind pattern, crowd support, that kind of thing. But half marathon, we're talking about this longer race, just as kind of like piggybacking on the 15K we talked about in the last video. This is a race where you really should never be in that state of acidosis until the very, very, very end of the race. You're crossing the finish line, you've gone all out at the end, that's perfectly fine. But this race, there's some similarities to the 15K, although I think there's some three main segments to really be aware of when you're looking at this. So basically, when you're looking at a half marathon, you've done your pace efforts, make sure that you have an idea of what you're actually capable of, because if you don't know what you're actually capable of, it doesn't really matter what your pacing strategy is. But if you know what you're essentially capable of from all the work that you've done prior to this, what you're going to want to do is break it up into 3 main segments. That's going to be your first 5 miles, your second 5 miles, and then the last 5K. There's this old saying that basically a half marathon is a 10-mile warm-up for a 5K race. It's not exactly right, but it's not completely untrue either. Essentially, you want to be building into that pace. And in the 15K race strategy, we talked about how you're kind of slowly kind of creeping up on it, where you're starting conservative and then you're really, really going by the end. It's fairly similar, but I just like to give my athletes that I'm working with those main checkpoints. The first 5 miles, it should be slower than your goal pace. If it's faster than your goal pace, one of 2 things has happened. One, you've gone out too hard and it's not going to be a great second half of the race. Or 2, you didn't really know what your fitness was to begin with. Typically, it's going to be that first thing. If you know that you're really, really fit, typically you have been doing this in your workouts and everything, and you have an idea. Sometimes that does happen, maybe with people that don't have quite as much confidence in themselves, but one of those 2 things should happen. Most people, though, should be slower than their goal pace for the first 5 miles, especially for that first mile. If you're fortunate enough to be in that elite area toward the front where you have a little bit more space to operate, that's great. If not, you're definitely going to want to be conservative, because there's a lot of weaving and things like that are going to happen. Now, there are definitely a lot of pacers in this, and I didn't talk about this in the 15K. If you're somebody that knows you're in a certain fitness level and you just need a pacer to keep you steady, in say the 15K, you want to be under, say, 75 minutes or something like that. I don't know if there is a 75-minute pacer, but you're in that fitness and your problem is always going out too hard, just stick with the pacer. Same thing with the half marathon. You know that you can break 2 hours and you always go out too hard, just stick with the pacer, even though it might be a little bit more crowded. If you need that, that's the best pacing strategy for you. If you know for a fact you're in that zone, you probably know you're a little bit faster, but you want to get that time goal, do that. That's the best strategy for you in that case. But if you're really wanting to maximize your time, this is the best way to do it. You're going out, you're a bit slower than that goal pace, 10 seconds per mile, something like that. And again, your first mile should be your slowest. So as you're getting to mile 4 to mile 5, maybe you're 5 seconds, 3 seconds slower than goal pace. And then when you get to that 7 mile mark, right around 7, between 6 and 7 is the halfway point. That's where you're in goal pace. This is what I'm trying to hit, and you're going to be right in that zone, and you're still going to be kind of slowly creeping up on that pace. So, you're at mile 6, you're at mile 7, you're at mile 8. You're still feeling good. Maybe you're ticking off about 1 to 2, 3 seconds per mile. You're kind of really getting into the zone of this. The real one key caveat is typically when you get to the end of Bayshore, at this race, you kind of do this little hook inland a little bit, and then you go back around. If there's going to be wind, it's typically going to be a little bit more in your face coming back. So just be prepared for that. That first mile, when you flip around, you might need to recalibrate things just a little bit. Now, calibrating, talking about watches and GPS, it's usually pretty good down there, so you should have a pretty good feel for what you're actually doing. There's not a lot of big buildings right there that screw up the GPS, so you should be getting a pretty good accurate assessment of what you're actually running per mile. And there's a ton of mile markers and things like that on the course, so you have an idea of how close you are in terms of what your watch is saying and where you actually are in the race. But that's the way you really want to approach it. If you're getting to that turn, you're getting to the end of Bayshore, you're kind of turning off and that turn's about to happen, I would maybe, if you're very close to a pack, maybe push just a tiny bit to get to that pack so that they can help block the wind for you if there is a group. If you're by yourself, just kind of stay steady and prepare yourself for it. And this might be the year you turn around and there's no wind. And one of the good things, the way Gasparilla Half Marathon is, you're actually going to be a little bit more blocked from the wind on the return than in, say, the 15K, 8K, or 5K, because you're actually going to be closer to the buildings away from the water on the return, and it tends to block the wind just a little bit. But essentially, take those first 2 segments like that, the first 5 miles, you're a bit slower than goal pace, and you're kind of progressing through to where that mile 4, mile 5, you're getting close to race pace, but not quite there. When you get to 6, 7, kind of right at goal pace, you're creeping down just a little bit with that idea of you're going to turn around and you're still going to be in the segment when you're coming back. And then when you get to that last 5K, that's where you're going as hard as you really can at that sort of intensity, right? You're not doing mile pace for the last 5K, but you're just slowly increasing the intensity as you're into that last 5K of the race. Again, this is a gradual push. This is a gradual kick. If I tell people, if you're at that point and you think holding another mile at goal pace and then going for 2 miles, that can be beneficial too. But really kind of talk yourself up. You're getting to that point, hey, this is going to be the best 5K of my life as I'm coming out of this first 10 miles. I'm going to set this new PR. Really kind of gas yourself up essentially at this point, because this is where it's really critical. You've done a lot of this hard, strong work to this point. You're at this point in the race. You've paced yourself correctly. Now it's time to really go and get after it and get that new PR. So that's how I would pace it. If you have any specific questions about yourself, or again, if you're someone that might be enjoying the course for a little bit longer and you want some help with you, maybe in terms of like fueling. We haven't talked about fueling in this series at all. Definitely you would want to fuel a bit in the half marathon. So if you have any questions about that, ask them in the comments down below.
Guys, first time breaking 15. Join FRC. It's worth it.